Dobar dan. Welcome to virtual Croatia Fest. We're the Martinez family. We're here today to demonstrate making Hrustule and Pašurate. We're all related. Our grandfathers came from Komiza on the island of Vis. So what you see is going to be the way they were made there, which may not be the way your family made them. I'm Joanne Martinez, and this is Antoinette Sladish, my first cousin, and Barry Martinez, my second cousin. They'll introduce themselves. My dad, as I said, is from Komiza, and my mother is from Dalmatia. So after we introduce ourselves, we'll start.
I'm Antoinette Sladish, and my father's parents came from small villages around Dalmatia, and my mother came from Komiza on the island of Vis.
And I'm Barry Martinez. My father was Dr. Andrew Martinez. My grandfather, Paul Martinez, came from Komiza, and my grandmother grew up in Astoria, but her family's also from Komiza. That's Pearl Marinkovic.
So we're going to start first with Hrustule, and Antoinette will tell you a little bit about the recipe which Kate put them on after we start the dough cooking. Okay, so the recipe I think will be posted on the website, and I don't think we've ever made a single batch of the recipe. I don't know why it has this quantities in it. We always make at least a double, and oftentimes multiples. So we start with 6 eggs. I've already put 3 in the mixer, and we'll put in 3 more. Personally, I don't see how people ever use without kitchen eggs. Okay, and 6 tablespoons of sugar. Now, the quantities I'm going to do in the double recipe. And then 8 tablespoons of melted butter. A teaspoon of anise. If you do a lot of Croatian sweets, you use a lot of anise. Anise is near your bottle. There's a bit extra in.
I think so. Yeah. Like we like the anise over. Double it.
And then it seems like
We have to double it in.
yeah, so that's 2, so we do 4. Well, and you know, the high fat frying kind of gets rid of it. Okay. 2 teaspoons of vanilla, so that's 4. What is it called? No, 1 teaspoon. And a tablespoon of whiskey, which also seems to go in these desserts.
Seems to be a common ingredient in desserts.
There's just another excuse to have it. Half a teaspoon of salt. Also, we have to start heating up the oil, so Antoinette's going to do everything.
So we're going to fill it with the fry pan, and we're about 2/3 of the way up. Fry with the Hrustule. That's about right. And temperature is going to be 350.
Yes.
So we'll turn this up. We can start cleaning it. See?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my reading glasses. Sacred thing. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Now we'll be adding more.
So you want to end up with a fairly soft, pliable dough, and as anyone who makes bread knows, the amount of flour you add to anything depends on humidity and a whole lot of other stuff. So we say 2.5 to 3 cups. You just don't want the dough to be dry. Yes, so we're going to heat double. So we've got to be nice. Now, all of us grew up having Hrustule as Christmas trees when we were kids and at weddings. And then as adults, I never had them. I moved away. I never thought, I don't want to be making this too much work. So my immediate first cousins, when I moved back to Washington, we started getting together in December and doing something. And one year, we were making gingerbread houses. And we got to talking about Christmases, and we all realized that we never made Hrustules and we really missed them, but we didn't want to do all the work. So since then, we've gotten together on several Christmases, and that's just what we did. We make Hrustule, and we make a great big batch, and everybody got something to take home.
We're gonna talk a little bit about the recipe.
Yeah.
This recipe, my mother had it from her aunt, Antoinette Martinez. And as a child, I remember going over to my great aunt's house and making Hrustule. This definitely is not a one-person project. You definitely need a few more hands. So that has been a long tradition, and we've had it for many years growing up. And only more recently, getting together with the cousins and making it's really brought back those memories of that particular time, Christmas time, and with special desserts and treats that we have that are from the old country.
That's about right. You can see it's still a bit stretchy. And if it is in the end, it's better that it's a little bit too moist because you can always add flour when you're rolling it. You really don't want it to be too dry because there's not a lot. Okay, and then usually I beat it a little bit to make sure everything's incorporated. Yeah, when I finish kneading this, which will be in a couple more minutes, we're going to cut it in smaller pieces and leave it to rest for 15 to 20 minutes, and we're going to take a break in the video. Hi, we're back. We've let the dough rest for about 15 minutes. Makes it easier to roll. Barry's going to roll them out. Antina's going to fry them and tell you about that. And Barry will tell you about the roll.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Joanne. So Joanne made this tablecloth a while back, which is absolutely perfect because the first time I saw her demonstrate this was at Croatia Fest a few years ago. And her instructions are you roll out the dough until you can see the pattern through the dough. And then you know you've got it thin enough. So let's see if we can do that. I start by pressing the dough a little bit. You flour the tablecloth a little bit. You don't want to add a lot of flour to the dough, but of course you don't want it to stick while you're rolling it out. I turn it frequently to try to prevent it from sticking to the cloth. And we may have forgotten to mention that we do cut it into smaller balls so that you're not rolling a huge piece at once, because that makes it especially hard to get it thin enough.
It's also a good idea to cover it so it doesn't dry out.
So I can see the patterns from here. What do you think, Antoinette? Feel an edge and see. Turn it another time or
That
two.
seems pretty thin. I would go with that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm using a little pastry cutter, fluted one, to make little strips.
Rolling that. Should I try one?
What's the thing? Oh, that one. Cut one here. So what we do is put them on a tray here to get them ready to fry. You can't throw all of these in at once into the fry pan. I'll just take one now to demonstrate putting it in the oil. So you want to make sure the oil is hot enough. So you take one of your pieces, and the trick passed down from my great aunt is to stretch these to get them even thinner. So you just stretch and stretch as best you can before they break. And this is an extremely long one, so sometimes people will make bows and so forth for them. I don't usually do that. I just like the strips, but that definitely when you have a long piece like this, you could do that. You could try a bow for the world. And drop it in. And what you want to know about with the oil, make sure it's ready, is that it'll rise up quickly in the bubble, and that's telling you the oil is warm enough. We've got it set to about 375, 365. Yeah, just because as you start frying, the oil temperature drops. So what we're looking for now is for the little brown edges on the back, on the side that's underneath the oil, and then we'll flip them over and get them just to the right color. Take them out, put them in the colander with lined with paper towels, and then we'll powder sugar them on the inside of the colander. Looks like they're turning brown on that side, so of course that's all your preference. If you like them a little toastier, leave them in longer, or leave them in less if you like them less toasted. And this one's cooking up really fast, so I'm just gonna kind of test it with underneath to make sure it's not too dark. It's pretty good. Okay, good. So drop it in here. And we have more in here, but we just put powdered sugar on them. However, yeah, we've got a couple of different methods to put powdered sugar on it. Let it sit there for a while so it can drain, and then we'll move it over to a platter. Put it on a platter.
And I usually take them out and just turn them over and then sort of the other side. And you can use either a shaker like this or a strainer.
Yes.
I like lots of powdered sugar, so I poured sugar every day before I serve them.
So now I'm making them a little bit shorter strips so that we can just have strips. Will fit in this fry pan. Okay, now we're just about finished up making Hrustule, and we just want to point out a couple of things to you. The Hrustule, if you keep them in an airtight container, they'll keep for a week or so. But another thing you can do is freeze them. They freeze very well. And that way you can have them year round. Especially if you make a large batch like we did. Again, the stretching is very important. Gives you nice, light, airy.
And while I'm at barrier finishing up the Hrustule, I'm going to start making the Pašurate dough. Now, I really like these. Some of my cousins don't like them so much. Some of the relatives call them grease balls. Some of the relatives call them cannonballs. Because unlike Hrustule, they really aren't very good the next day. They get hard as rags. They're essentially a fritter. And they fry up really nicely. They taste really good, but by the next day they're kind of dried out. So usually when I suggest we make them, I get a rousing chorus of no, let's make Hrustule instead. But once you got the grease, you might as well make them. So we will also post a recipe on the website. This recipe came from my grandma, Frida Martinez, who was my grandfather's second wife. She was an American, and she really didn't know how to cook Croatian food. So she got a lot of recipes from the Martinez relatives, and this recipe originally came to Frida from Winnie Martinez. So I'd like to give you a credit for it. Okay, so we're going to start out with 1 egg. Well beaten. Then we're going to add a cup of milk. And of course, in those days, they used whole milk. So that's now, you will find some similarities here. Flavorings are anise, whiskey, orange, and lemon. So we put in 2 tablespoons of sugar, which I pre-measured. There's not a lot of sugar in these, so we actually get used to go into this from the front. And a tablespoon of whiskey. And a teaspoon of anise, and as before, we'll probably add a little bit extra. Now, that story comes from the food. So the next thing that we're going to add is a mashed banana. Now the banana should be really ripe. This one isn't quite as ripe as it should be because I forgot to buy it and we were in Vegas. But if it's really ripe, it's very sweet, plus it mixes very well. I'm just going to use the fork. Basically, you mash it like you mash it with the banana. And then you're going to mix the thing pretty well. And if it's too large, it's going to be a little. Now the next thing we're going to add is 2 cups of flour, a tablespoon of baking powder, a teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon cinnamon, and a 1/2 teaspoon nutmeg. And I've already mixed all those things together. And my guess is that many of our younger audience do not own a flour sifter because flour doesn't really need to be sifted anymore. So the easiest way to mix this together is just put it in a bowl and mix it with a wire whisk. You see it's still pretty soft, liquidy dough. Now, we add a cup of raisins, and you should soak your raisins because oftentimes raisins tend to be really dry and you just want to hydrate them a little bit. You can soak them in anything. You can soak them in water, apple cider. Since we're going to use orange peel in the recipe, I use the orange juice. And if you used a lot of liquid, you should drain it because you don't want it to be too strong. And the easiest way to hydrate them is really to just put them in a bowl, and cover it with saran, and stick it in the microwave for a few seconds. Now there's very little liquid, so I'm just going to dump it in first. Now the next thing we add is a coarsely grated orange peel and coarsely grated lemon peel. I already grated the orange because I needed the orange juice to soak. And when you grate it, use a fairly coarse hole in your grater. You're not making fine zest like you do for a lot of things. You want it chunky. And anytime you're doing zest, you just take the surface. The orange peel that I already grated. And you really don't want to grate this stuff too far in advance because the volatile oils volatilize and you lose flavor. Now we're going to mix that into this. There are a couple walnuts, coarsely chopped. If you have time, you can toast them a little bit, but you don't have to. Okay, and then the last thing you add are 2 small grated apples. And you can use almost anything. I like the flavor of yellow delicious in food, so I'm using them. Now, I'm only going to use one because the 2 small apples are those little things that grow all over great on some little apple trees that we never get very good. So I figure 2 of those little ones is the equivalent of 1 of these big ones. And I leave the skin on. I did wash all these really well, and everything is coated in whatever these days. Just wash it with a scrub brush and not soapy water. Now the apple you could actually do in a Cuisinart if you have them, but peels you have to do by hand, so that's what I'm doing with apple. It looks like the Hrustules are on this time too. Now we're doing this in August, so you have to imagine this is a real treat to anniversary of that summer. Now, these are made with baking powder. A lot of the traditional recipes are made with yeast. Both of them give you aeration. I think the yeast probably gives a little bit more of a flavor, but baking powder is foolproof. Now we're going on the stage, whisk and using a spatula. And just make sure everything's folded in, that you don't see any flour. And after they're done, we'll try a test one. The dough looks a little bit loose to me, so I may add a little bit more flour. Let's see if we try them. Okay, we're back again to demonstrate frying the Pašurate. Now, when I first made the dough, it was a little bit runny. And so I did a test fry, and they were still raw in the middle when the outside was done. And I think it's because there was too much moisture. I used a pretty big apple. So I simply added some more flour, and as you can see, it's thicker now. And they're cooking in the appropriate time. The recipe says 350 to 375. For these, we start at 375 because it's a wetter dough and it drops the temperature of the oil quite a bit. So you drop them basically by teaspoonfuls into the oil. You let them rise, and you cook them. And I think in the recipe I wrote cook them to a light golden brown, but today we're cooking them to a medium brown because that's how long it takes to cook them. Then you take them out and you drain them briefly, and then you put them in a paper bag with sugar and shake them. And that's the last step. So granulated sugar this time rather than powdered sugar. And I'm not going to cook a lot at a time because, again, the temperature of the oil drops considerably. Now, we could put more oil in and raise it up because the Hrustule absorbs quite a bit. But since we're almost done and we have to dispose of the oil, I'd rather not make any more. And these take longer to cook too because they're thicker and wetter. And again, if you're making a lot of these, having 2 to 5 minutes would be a good idea. Now, what was different about those ingredients besides the whiskey?
Oh, and the Hrustule, I was just gonna say, in this, I think I've seen this done with yogurt and applesauce.
Well, that makes sense too. The applesauce is like banana.
Yes. But this is a very sort of homey recipe. When I brought them home to my father after making them one time in Anacortes, he was so overjoyed. He had tears in his eyes. He said, "We used to call these Lily's balls." In a very affectionate way.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
And then the next bit of balls.
Right. Yeah, you have to eat them right away for sure. You can't freeze these, right?
I don't think so. I mean, well, maybe I'll try with these, you know? Maybe it in the oven. You try.
Yeah. If it lasts.
I would have never thought to freeze the Hrustule, so. So as you can see, they're kind of a medium brown. And the way you could also test is, I did test fry one, that's why the dough was too wet. Because when I took it out, and the outside was nicely brown, but when I cracked it open, it was still raw. And that's always a trade-off. You want them to cook fast enough that they don't get too greasy, but if they cook too fast, it's serious. Okay, now Barry's going to shake it in the granulated sugar and paper bags. And that's all there is to it. They're really fast to make. You don't have to do a little rolling or anything.
Okay.
And they're not that greasy, so I'm not sure it's called grease balls. But they are fried, that's for sure.
You do have to wait at least long enough to burn them out.
For what?
You have to wait at least long enough not to burn them out.
Yes, you do need to let them cool a little bit. Okay, we've come to our demonstration of Croatian cooking. Barry is sugaring the last of the Pašurate. You see a nice full plate of them here and a beautiful plate of Hrustule, which we are all going to go and eat. So we thank you for watching. Do viđenja, and hopefully see you next year at the non-virtual Croatian Fest.
Do viđenja.
Virginia.